Welcome back, everyone, to the Property Journey podcast, episode 34. Welcome, Roy.
Afternoon.
We're on schedule here. This is we're getting these done rightly. Episode 34. I want to discuss with you whether or not you have a lot of knowledge on it. I would say you probably do, because you've maybe faced a few scenarios yourself. Disputes in property investment, or even generalized, because a lot of these scenarios may potentially knock on to people just with buying their own houses, things like that there as well. But disputes in property, an interesting one, because it can kind of cover a lot of different areas. But what kind of, on a broad scheme of things, what are the kind of common disputes that people would face within property investment, things like that?
Property investment, there probably wouldn't be too many disputes. I can't really think of any. No, because normally if somebody's buying an investment property, if there's any disputes, they're not going to happen beforehand, because those disputes, they're mitigated, they're removed. It's maybe something that they're not happy with over the structure of the house or the condition of the house. And I wouldn't really call it a dispute. A dispute is really more of just a wee bit of negotiation to fix that niggle or that problem, and then you move on. So I suppose from the initial point of view, from investment, there wouldn't be, touch wood, I haven't come across many disputes.
A lot of them probably then, as you say, tend to come afterwards.
Yes, there would be, frustrations would be very common when people buy a property, whether it's an investment or very common maybe home movers buying a property. We would occasionally get phone calls then afterwards when somebody's moved in to say, the burglar alarm's not working, or there's a radiator not working, those sorts of things, and they become very frustrated. Those, yes, I can understand the big frustrations with that, but the downside to it is whenever you buy a property, it's buyer beware, and it's completely up to the buyer to make sure they're satisfied. Now, the only comeback that they have is if a seller is fully aware of an issue and hasn't disclosed it. Now, on the outside looking in, that sounds as if brilliant, there's a bit of protection, but what I find in the real world is it's then up to the buyer to prove that the seller actually knew that there was an issue or a dispute. So a common one or scenario could be maybe the boiler stops working before you, or sorry, the boiler stops working whenever you move in. That could be easily argued that it's just unfortunate. But yet, if you can prove that the motor was completely seized and has been seized for months and months, and that the seller hadn't any heat on, well then yes, you have a comeback. So the dispute then comes to a point whereby it's up to the buyer to prove that the seller knew that there was an issue.
Yeah. Have you, say, maybe encountered a serious dispute or a dispute along your way, kind of in your own personal journey?
Not personally. Thankfully, anything that I've come across, I've either let go fairly quickly. So personally, I can think of one whereby we were renovating a property, commercial property in the local town, and the outside alleyway wasn't ours, but we needed access into it, just I think it was like for 10 minutes or something, to bore a hole through a wall, and the owner just come out all guns blazing, screaming, shouting, mad, and I just simply took a view of, well, listen, this is 10 minutes. Once we've the work done in 10 minutes time, that's us. We're off the land. We're not causing any harm here. Sorry that you're feeling a wee bit upset here, but maybe you're getting worked up here. But kept the situation calm, got our work done, and got out of there. But that could be something that could have escalated. Very simply, I could have got into an argument to say, listen, it's only 10 minutes here, and what are you at? Calm down and
Clear
off, and then get solicitors involved and all the rest of it. Take a practical approach, because at the end of the day, the way I looked at it was, he was a bit annoyed, and 10 minutes, we weren't causing any damage to his land, his property, and in 10 minutes time he wasn't going to see us again.
I suppose then the as you say there, that for that 10-minute period that issue was ongoing, is then kind of the difficulty where, say, for example, further down the line, you maybe need to have access to that. And I'm not saying on a regular basis every day, but say infrequently kind of access. Is that kind of then where sometimes disputes can arise then, where there's always seems to be a problem with you coming in and out, maybe having to access it and things like that?
Well, from his point of view, well, from my point of view, looking at him, he was a business owner, local business owner, and this is how he was reacting. So I didn't think it was actually very good for him to get all worked up unnecessarily for it. It was his commercial premises. It was a part that we didn't realise actually he was using, or he was there. Otherwise, we actually would have asked him first of all. And we thought he wasn't there. We had approached a couple of times. The place was empty. And, I said we're doing no harm. But as you say, if that was happening regularly, well, there's that relationship now completely broken. That's maybe what he wanted. And fair dues if that's what it is. Yes, if I have to go back to him and I want access over that property or that land, it's probably going to become
a big issue.
It's not going to be available. But it was something that I was generally aware of whenever I bought the property, and purposely when we bought it, we got another access way into it at the rear of it anyway. So I was aware that was a potential, and I have a plan B in place.
And I suppose down to due diligence, essentially. Yes. You find these problems out, then you're able to put a plan in place to deal with it. If you're going to do a lot of work or structural work, this is where I would find it gets people's back up. A lot of people in the world somehow don't like change. Mm-hmm. If there's a fence there and the fence has been there for 30 years, even if the fence is half rotten, it's very strange that some neighbours still don't want change, and that they don't want anybody working at it or anything, or they don't want to have to pay any money towards it. So if there's any change, any disruption, any noise, any construction, and ultimately a potential of any cost, very quickly some people just get worked up, and that's when the disputes arise. So I'm kind of going to maybe touch over a few sort of overview points here of potential disputes that can kind of come across. So one of the main ones would obviously be, this would essentially be for the property investor, would be like tenant versus landlord sort of disputes. What kind of would that entail? Are you talking maybe rent arrears? Are you talking maybe renters would like something done to the house, landlord is disputing that and kind of saying, well, no, it's not happening. Those types of the common disputes you would get between tenants and landlords?
Generally, yes, a tenant maybe wants something done to the property, and they may feel that it's within the scope of the landlord, but yet the landlord doesn't want it. Like I heard one time where a tenant was getting very frustrated because the oil burner was a wee bit old, maybe wasn't efficient, and was demanding a brand new central heating system put in. So, looking in, I can see the tenant wanted that because it makes it cheaper to run and all the rest of it, and the house is warmer. But there was no point or no need or no legal obligation for the landlord to actually pay. So if somebody's asking for something and they're immediately met with a no, then that's whenever it doesn't work. So it's normally tenants and landlords fall out like that, or if a tenant has went and done work without permission. So a big one would maybe be they've painted, they've carried out work to the house like that, or I'm trying to think, sometimes maybe they've changed doors, or they've had one,
put down new carpets, things like that.
Yes, or had one where a tenant actually painted the kitchen cupboards and they were painted black. So, that wasn't an enhancement.
No.
And could be looked at as destructive
to
it. So, those scenarios, then, yes, that's very common. That can create rows.
Is it, and I suppose then as well, disputes probably is also the way that say for example, maybe the tenants are acting within the property, sort of maybe parties maybe going on, or antisocial behaviour, or they maybe aren't taking care of the property, things like that there can all then play in as well.
That brings in disputes. Very difficult to prove, because what you normally find is the neighbours won't approach the tenant who's making the noise. Instead, they'll lift the phone to the landlord and report all round. So when the landlord either has two ways of looking at it, they can either say, well, it's not for me to get involved, or if they do get involved, well then they're going with third party information and it's a matter of who's right, who's wrong. And in fact, maybe the tenant isn't acting inappropriately, and it could be the fact that the neighbour is doing this out of badness, so it just gets into a spiral.
And not something that's easy to kind of navigate either. It's not something that's easy to control, and there's, as you say, never probably going to be a right answer either.
No, it's always, you start out at the beginning, here's your tenancy agreement, summarise it in bullet points to say this is what you can do, this is what you cannot do, this is what you're going to be charged if you do the likes of this, and this is what the landlord's obligations are. And if you do that at the very start, you're setting out the expectations, and immediately, well, you should hopefully be completely wiping out any possible fallout.
Yeah. Next kind of then overview would be, say, for example, joint ventures and potential business partnerships coming in when it comes to property. You know, in terms of disputes, it's very easy for partners to fall out and have a disagreement, and that's not an easy dispute to navigate either.
No. If you want a partner, get a dog. I think I've said that a few times before. Unless if you're in a partnership with somebody who you're completely either set on the same path, or you've got your strengths and weaknesses and the other partner has their strengths and weaknesses, and you go with them. So for instance, if you're both on the same strategy, well then that's it. You go towards it, and it's simple. One where people fall down on is they don't realise maybe what their weaknesses or what their strengths are, and they've got a partner, and then maybe that partner's not doing something that they would do, but at the end of the day, maybe in simple terms, maybe what they want to do is actually better. So it's knowing what your strengths, what your weaknesses are, and learning to let go, where to let go and where to hold on to it as well. And in those scenarios, that's why you don't get into property partnership unless it's with somebody that you really know, so that if things maybe start not to go to plan, well then you can very simply have an amicable talk about it and say, listen, this isn't what I want, this is what I thought, so how do we very simply sort this out?
Yeah, because I suppose when it comes to that side of things as well with joint ventures, you know, you're chatting, there's a lot of money on the table as well, and obviously when money's involved, you know, a lot of people are, let's just say, would be out for themselves. You know, they're only going to be thinking about themselves, what they're going to be losing, not what the other person's going to be losing, because probably, quite frankly, they don't care as long as their interests are protected. And is that then sort of then, you know, you're going to have disputes about that. There's going to be, you know, a very strong argument about, you know, are we in this together, or are you out for yourself, essentially?
Thankfully, in all my years, I've only come across one joint venture that didn't work. But when you stop and look at it, it probably wasn't going to work in the first place. So it was two guys that had basically just met at, I think it was just like a social event where the new people, and they just happened to get talking, and they both were chatting to say they would love to buy a property, and they decided, well, sure, let's buy one together. And one was more of a, you know, figures and education and that side of things, and the other one was more hands-on, practical. They bought a property, and then literally 6-9 months later, then, you know, that's whenever the disagreements arose. But thankfully they got things sorted out, and they agreed one was going to buy the other one out, and they got the house valued, they figured it all out, had it all. At that point they did probably the due diligence to get out, which they should have put the same effort in before they started. But thankfully, a few months later, it was sorted out, and everything ended happily.
Obviously, if you are, as you say, going into a joint venture, going into a partnership with someone, you know, just do a lot of your own research. Maybe not even so much of your own research, but just, you know, be aware of who you're going in with. And also the other person should be looking at you and kind of going, am I the right fit to be going in with you, for example? You know, those sides of things. I suppose then maybe looking at the next kind of overview would be refurbishments and also kind of contractors coming in, you know, if you're maybe not so much as a full refurbishment, but also maybe needing work done around properties, things like that there. Can there be disputes of where the landlord is obviously disputing kind of some of the work that's maybe being done, or the contractors maybe disputing kind of, well, this isn't what I was told, those sides of things?
That can be quite common in the refurbishment game, and if it hasn't really been clear at the start. So for instance, if you've maybe if somebody's priced round saying, you know, to get work done, and they're maybe getting somebody in that they don't know, and they've maybe priced the cheapest contractor, and then it transpires, well, it hasn't been done properly, or their method was a wee bit different to what somebody else was going to do, and therefore that's the reason why it's cheaper. That's whenever the rows happen. It's if you're getting into that game, you need to know what you're at, so that you know what sort of contractor are you getting in, and what exactly are they going to be doing, so that everybody's transparent. You've got a costing point of view, and you also have to be prepared that cost is going to run over. You know, a lot of people think they've got a price and that's what it's going to cost.
Yeah.
But if you're going into an old building and you can get prices all day long and you think that's it, but as soon as work starts, there's always something else. It's always going to open up another can of worms or something like that. And if you think that you're going to bring in a contractor to do work that nothing else is going to crop up and you're not going to have to pay extra, something wrong now.
Yeah. And I suppose then as well, is it a case of then, obviously price is one of the big ones. You know, a lot of people are always saying, as you say there, looking at a quote, and the quote doesn't then match the final price, you know, and then there will always be an argument over that, where it's just, well, that's not what you quoted me. Yeah. You know, not looking in, as you say, you know, it's an old property, the chances are, you know, there's been something has cropped up, and the reason why it's dear is there's maybe more materials were needed, or you know, a simple explanation as to, you know, the jobs ran over, it taken 2 days rather than a day and a half, whatever it happens to be. But is it also then maybe where the work wasn't, you know, here's what I wanted, and the end product isn't actually maybe how it was meant to turn out? Yeah. Is those types of things then can be crop up?
It's that, and then maybe adding a wee bit of the blame onto the contractor point of view is maybe not them being fully open as well. So, like, I've worked with contractors in the past whereby I've given them full trust and I let them do whatever they want, and yes, if they find another problem, they do it, and we've built up that relationship that if it's relatively not that costly, then they'll just go on ahead and do it, and I'll not know about it until I get the bill. Or they know that if it's a real big issue, they immediately contact you. You know, in every world, I think some people expect to get a running commentary on everything. You know, a plumber, if you get a plumber in, they're not going to be phoning you constantly every hour. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I've had this problem, I've had that problem. Some people want that. So if you want that, you need to find the right sort of contractor. And if they've come across a problem, they have to fix it. You know, it's like going to a mechanic and saying, here, change my brake pads. Right, well, that's all right. You could go to a mechanic and they'll change the brake pads. But if you have a mechanic that says, well, actually your brake discs aren't great either, well, okay, if they just change the pads because that's what they've done, they've been told, well, they haven't done a good job. So obviously if they're going to come back and say, oh, by the way, you needed new brake discs to make your new brake pads work, it's going to cost more. Well, you can't shout at the mechanic.
Yeah. No, 100%. Probably the big one that a lot of people may or may not have, you know, heard of, but neighbour disputes and obviously boundary disputes as well. Yeah. What kind of is your viewpoint on those types of disputes then?
They would be a lot more common. I would say there wouldn't be a week goes past that I don't get 2 or 3 emails or inquiries in. Roy, can I get a copy of my deeds? What they're looking their deeds for is really they want a map, and from the map they're trying to figure out the boundaries. The maps that we're working with, you know, generally you can't really see much from them. So the only way around it is you take the land registry map, you send that out to a surveyor. The surveyor takes it, comes out and maps it out or marks it out exactly on the ground, and you can see then where and what who owns what, and then from that you have to figure out who's right and who's wrong, and how does it be fixed.
Those types of boundary disputes, are they? Because I know I actually laugh at what you're saying sometimes, but you realise is you've maybe got more ground and you're inside your fence area than what you should have, and you shouldn't have maybe brought it up, and keep your mouth shut, for example, because you're going to end up losing more than what you've currently got. But is it kind of, do a lot of these things come about for example, you touch there on fencing, for example, party fences, things like that there, where one person thinks the fence needs replaced, the person beside them, their next door neighbour thinks, oh well, geez, the fence looks all right from my side.
Yeah.
Is that kind of where these neighbour disputes and things like that there come about? Parking, for example, outside properties and things like that.
It's generally the fence is a very common one, and then as to where is the fence, is it slightly into their property or into the neighbour's property, and then what side of the board's on is one that we always hear, and that's where the row comes. It's normally the cost of it, and maybe it's me. I find solutions to every problem, and yes, nobody likes spending money, but would you rather pay for half a fence, or for half of a fence being replaced, or paying for the whole lot of it? And if somebody's coming to me saying, listen, this fence is going to be rotten, it's not in great shape here, but it's inevitable here in the next 2 to 3 years, it's definitely going to fall down, I'm going to get it fixed, I'm going to take all the hassle of it, will you share the costs with me? Surely that's a common sense approach.
Yeah.
But most people are like, no, I'm not paying anything, it's not my fence. And ultimately what you find is the fence maybe blows down, then you're left with no fence, and if you've kids or you have a dog or pets or whatever, well, now they're free to roam about wherever they want. And not only that, the cost in 3 years' time is going to be a lot more than
the 3 years previous.
Because even I put my fence up at home about 5 years ago. The fence cost was about $5,000. Went to put one up last year. It was going to cost the best part of $10,000. I had to think of another solution. So on hindsight, when I was replacing one fence, I should have replaced the two back then. That was no neighbour dispute. No, that was just my own fence. But same concept. Just get it done.
Yeah.
Get it done.
And as I'm guessing then, we're sort of touching on fences there, but you could go as far as saying then neighbour disputes, boundary disputes, probably more so neighbour rooms, and then kind of if you're maybe looking at extension plans or building work or those sides of things, is that again another sort of dispute that can kind of crop up? Maybe not necessarily over the fence, as I would call, for example, a fence dispute is kind of like an over the fence where you're kind of back and forth with each other over the wall or over the fence. But the likes of your extension plans, that's kind of more of a dispute through the paperwork kind of a side of things.
Generally that, yes. And then I'm thinking maybe more rural properties, those disputes can arise. And then access, maybe. I'm thinking of one there lately whereby just the neighbours just personally, I think they fell out with each other. They didn't like what the other one was doing or something, or wearing or whatever. And then they go looking for problems, and then they realise, well, that's a shared laneway, and you know what, in fact, they think they own it, and then they try to block it, and then it just spirals out of control. So there'd probably be more neighbour disputes, apart from the fences. Fences one's very common with town properties. Yeah. But a lot of the other neighbour disputes would maybe be more for rural properties.
Yeah. And have you ever come across the likes of parking ones as well? Maybe slightly older properties where, let's just say that the roads, people are parking on roadsides. There's not even a designated parking bay, but I should have the parking space outside the front of my house, and that side of things.
It's trivial. I'm actually, that sparks my memory. There's a development in a local town, and there's parking spaces basically outside every house. There's probably in the first row marked out spaces, maybe 2 to 3 spaces, and it's supposed to be on average 2 spaces per house, but nobody owns those car parking spaces. But it's just everybody has this natural thought, well, those 2 outside my house
As mine.
is mine.
Yeah.
And there's one guy that I know, and his view is, well, those 2 are for me. He only has 1 car, so he parks in the 2 spaces. So it's not really a neighbour dispute. You could say he's creating a neighbour dispute, or he's just,
Being thrown.
So, that's how people think.
Yeah. And if you're sort of looking at that going, there's a space that someone could park in,
That you're not using.
that you're not using.
You don't need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can understand where back to the word frustration.
Yeah.
The frustration could come in there, kind of going, I'd love to let your tires down some night. On to the last couple. Disputes obviously then can arise then with potentially, say for example, you're using a property agent or something along those lines, maybe a management company, to rent out properties. Can there be disputes arise from there? Is it maybe a dispute between a renter and maybe the management company, but also then the management company acting on behalf of the landlord? Can there be...
That's common. That's common because the agent is acting as the middle person or the messenger, and it can be very easy for a landlord sometimes not to deal with an issue or to ignore an issue, and then that means the agent's stuck in the middle where they're basically going back to the tenant to say, well, we don't have permission, we don't have authority, we don't know what the landlord wants, and then they have to take all the flack. And then because they're the point of contact, they're taking the frustration, and then yes, disputes and arguments snowball.
Yeah. And then is it, as well as that, then can it be a case of, say for example, a management company maybe goes ahead and does something, but the landlord's clearly not interested in maybe something being fixed or something along those lines? Can that then cause a problem between landlords and the company?
Agent? Oh, yes. It comes back to the relationship. So for instance, all the landlords I work with, I only work with landlords that I can work with. So what I mean by that is, they know that if there's a plumbing issue or an electrical issue and it's a fairly small scenario, we won't even phone them, we'll get it sorted out, and it comes out of their rent. And all the landlords that I work with are delighted about that, because at the end of the day, they don't want to get the phone call to say the boiler's not working and it's only going to cost 40 quid or 50 quid. That's the whole point of us being there. But there are some landlords who, again, as I said earlier on, they want a full running commentary, so that if there's ever any issue, if the rent's a day late, if the boiler breaks down, any penny spent before it is spent, they want to know.
Yeah.
And again, that's a relationship, and a landlord needs to pick an agent that they're going to get that level of service from. They're not going to get it from me. Because that, to me, that's not how they should be running their property. The whole point of having an agent is to be hands off, take the hassle out of it, so you can actually get on with your own business or job, or just your own time.
And because ironically, as you say there, to get a rundown on, a 40 quid job or a 50 quid job or whatever, realistically, the management company is probably going to slightly increase the cost, knowing that they're doing more work because of the rundown that they're having to give. So are you actually saving money by choosing 40 or 50 pound jobs, or and getting a running commentary, or are you actually better off not knowing about it? The job's done, there's no hassle, and the management company's still charging the same money because they're just playing on and doing the job for you.
Exactly.
Is it that kind of way up job where what's actually more beneficial for you? And not to mention then, obviously, the more you question and the more problems you're kind of nearly bringing up, the higher the chance of a dispute arising. Because you're going to be agitated, you're going to be frustrated if, for example, you're an agent and constantly being questioned by a landlord, or vice versa with a tenant constantly being, it's frustrating.
It's frustrating for the agent as well, because at the end of the day, an agent is employed to do that job, and you're putting that trust in it. It's the same as a solicitor, it's the same as any job or role. You're employing that expert, that specialist, and you have to put the trust in them. If you're questioning them, and if you're looking to see everything that's happening, nobody wants to be watched. Nobody, by all means, yes, if somebody maybe is acting a wee bit not correct or they're a wee bit negligent or whatever, that's a completely different ball game. But if you're picking somebody to work for you, to do a job for you, and you trust them, you need to give them full trust.
Yeah. In terms then of, obviously we've covered an array of potential disputes, obviously ranging from tenants and landlords to neighbours and obviously agents. Where do you go then in terms of resolutions? Is it to your own solicitor? Is it, do you try and maybe sort it out between yourselves? What kind of are the potential resolutions then?
Most of the time, you be upfront and you try and deal with it yourself. This is where a lot of the issues arise, where people immediately run to outside people. So, for instance, we said earlier, the next door neighbour runs to the landlord or the agent. Sometimes I'll let knock the door and say, listen, a bit of music there. It's a Saturday night. You're enjoying yourself. I can understand you've worked hard all week, but it's now 1 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. I've got wee ones here. You wouldn't mind just turning it down a wee bit, and that's it. You've knocked the door. You've been pleasant about it. Well, it's a different ball game then if they turn around and get awkward and nasty and what have you. And if they're doing it all the time. Most of the time, it could be the case where they don't actually realise that. I've had it before where the tenants didn't realise just the fact that how much noise was penetrating the walls. And as soon as it was pointed out to them, they were so apologetic and it never happened again. Mm-hmm. Same as somebody parking in the wrong place. Listen, I'm sorry, you're parking there. I can see you're taking up 2 spaces, but here, I have a bad leg at the minute. Would you mind not parking there so I can get the groceries in or out, and then after that I'll park over here? Again, just a wee conversation. But people jump straight on to maybe getting their counsellors, MLAs, solicitors, the council, anybody else at all. And that's just adding fuel to the fire. There are specialist mediators or arbitrators that you can go to. Then it comes down to you have to arbitrate who's paying for it. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, is that one of the biggest factors? But, because actually, a lot of times, sometimes these disputes can be dragged out for years. Yeah. You're chatting 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
10, 15 years. Yeah. Anything's possible.
And a simple conversation and kind of with the right mindset of, do we want this to drag out for so long? And at the end of it, a massive bill because of, as you say there, maybe legal costs and work being done, and it all just continues to add up and add up and add up and add up. And at the end of it, possibly what you're fighting over is going to be taken away on both sides because of the amount of money that it's taken in terms of costing.
I've seen all scenarios where it costs them a clean fortune, and it's very sad to say, I see people losing their health and people have lost their lives over it because it can get in on them and it just eats at them and it eats and eats, and it just, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
And that's it. It could start, as you say, start as something there as simple as an argument over a boundary fence.
Yeah.
And then the next minute, someone's getting a bit awkward about it, and then the other side decides they're going to get awkward about it. And as you say, then something that started over something very simple can just be completely escalated.
And it's phenomenal how the mind starts to work then, where it's actually starts to find ways to be awkward.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy the stories that we hear that people then come up with, whether they realise that the neighbour has CCTV and they're actually walking out, every hour through the middle of the night and standing in front of that CCTV camera just to provoke an attack. I've heard it all, and it's like, why would you do that?
I know. And as you say there, like even things like pointing lights at certain areas, so that it's shining in the back doors, it's just don't do it. Just don't do it. Anyway, we'll leave it there. That's disputes. If you are listening to this and you're thinking of any that you have heard or any wee stories that you want to tell us, give us a wee message and be interested. We'll maybe discuss them in the next podcast. But thank you very much, Roy.
Thank you.
That's Disputes, episode 34, folks, of the Property Journey podcast. Stay tuned and we'll be back for the next episode very soon. Thank you.